Hello everyone and welcome. My name is John Preston Smith. I'm the author of 14,000 Dogs Later, My Life with Dogs and What I've Learned, and more recently a book entitled The Bog, the Legend of Man's Best Friend. This is the third in a series of videos about dogs I remember, dogs that have been my personal best friends, and what I have learned from each of these canine critters. Recently, I talked with you about dogs I remember as being the most difficult to train, and the week before that I talked with you about my first two dogs, Jeep and Taxi. This week I want to tell you about Silver. Silver was dog number 3 in my life. He was all white, save for 2 black eyes. Guessing I would say I was nigh on to 7 years of age at the time. The giver of the dog told us the dog's name was the Lone Ranger. Remember the black eyes. But that's not very palatable for a 7-year-old boy who transposed his R's and W's. So since we couldn't shorten his name to Ranger, Dad changed his name to Silver, the name of the Lone Ranger's horse, Silver. Silver was an escape artist. Well, maybe not so much an artist, more so a bull. I'm not too sure there is such a thing as an escape bull, but if there were one, it would be Silver. No matter how Dad fortified the fence around the backyard, Silver could find a way out. He never jumped. He just found a weak link in Dad's fortifications. He'd back up 10 feet or so, and then he'd lunge head first like John Travolta in The Bull in the movie Michael. And off he'd go into the sunset until hunger pangs would outweigh Dad's reckoning and he'd come back home. And he never came home with a hangdog look. We'd leave the back gate open, and when he came home his head was always high, his tail a wagging, and a hint of a smile on his face, if there is such a thing for a dog. It was not until those memories in my later life put me to wondering what wondrous frolic he must have encountered above and beyond the whipping awaiting his return home. Since the patched fence was not working as an enclosure, Dad then put Silver on a 12-foot chain running the length of the yard. The chain was attached to Mom's clothesline and the other end to Silver's collar. Silver had a neck like a bulldog. He'd run with a burst of fury, full tilt, as the chain slipped along the clothesline until the lack of slack would jerk him totally off the ground. Usually after about 10 encounters, the chain would break, and once again he'd bull his way through the fence and be off to whatever addiction that had taken control of his nature. So finally, Dad said, we'll just keep Silver in the house, and that would have been a great idea, except our house had doors, and anytime someone would open a door to come or go, for Silver, it was an opportunity to go. And Katie barred the door for anyone standing in his way. For a while, Dad tolerated Silver's obsession. We'd all go traipsing around the neighborhood calling his name, depending mostly on porch-sitting neighbors who would merely politely point the direction that Silver had taken, mostly wondering at the futility of our dog-seeking efforts. I was an altar boy at St. Joseph Catholic Church, and more than once when I would hear parishioners giggling in the pews during Mass, I would know that Silver had followed my scent to church. He'd wait patiently at the church door for an elderly, slow-moving parishioner or a worshiper, and he'd sneak in before the door could close behind him. It was one of his favorite odysseys. Fortunately, the Monsignor had a sense of humor, and all I would get was a admonition, and was told to let Silver know that there were some things that even a dog was not permitted to do. Silver and I had a daily game. He loved to sleep in his later years, and when I would come home from school, I'd try to sneak up on him, but he always sensed my presence. I could never get within 10 feet of him before his head would slide in my direction and his eyes would lock on mine. Then he and I would sit on the back steps and I'd tell him about my day. He was a great listener. But mostly life's end is a bummer. And the day finally came when I could get within that 10-foot threshold and I knew he was gone. And so I remember sitting beside him on the ground and telling him about my day. So what did I learn from this bullish nomad? I did not know at the time, but looking back on my life, I know I've taken risks and chances beyond the length and breadth of most normal human beings. Did I learn to push beyond the limitations of life from my dog Silver? As sure as a battering ram can crash through a cardboard fence. And two, I learned from Silver to be a good listener. So until my next episode of Dogs I Remember, please consider purchasing my book, The Bog, The Legend of Man's Best Friend. It's a story about the spiritual connection between man and his dog, and all proceeds benefit our local children's hospital. So in closing, please remember that everybody needs a dog, and every dog needs somebody. You take care.